Getting right into things. Hey everyone, my name is Nicholas Zivko. I'm a sales development representative here at Worsta. Joining me today is Patrick Della Peruta, digital workspace practice lead.
Thanks, Nick. Glad to be here again.
Just to mention as well, you can also connect with us on LinkedIn. One of our colleagues will paste our profile links in the Meet chat. Thank you, Andrew. With that being said, this event is being hosted by Worsta. Our mission is to help organizations maximize their use of the cloud. We work side by side to help our clients make good technology decisions and grow their businesses in ways they wouldn't have the ability to do otherwise. This helps organizations develop cultures of continuous innovation powered by real-time collaboration. With all that collaboration, however, organizations have a lot to worry about in terms of Google Workspace and automation. That's why we're here today and why we've got our expert Patrick with us. Before I start, I want to walk through the importance of automation. With the new year starting, the goal is to revamp the way things have been done to be more efficient. One of my favorite quotes, doing less is more, is exactly why myself and Patrick chose this topic to present today. No, we're not talking about a contraption to move your mouse so your boss doesn't yell at you. This time here is to help you and your team save more time and make your work more efficient. With that being said, though, I love to hand it off to Patrick to talk about the many ways to automate your organization.
Thanks, Nick, and I'll work on that mouse bumping for you for the next time. But glad to be here again. I've done a couple of these in the past, which you can find links for. But in prepping for this, I really wanted to boil down the automation really in three key areas when you think about it from an admin's perspective. There are the repetitive tasks that we're doing every day: account provisioning, role access, group membership, things like that. Reporting and monitoring, staying on top of what is happening in your ecosystem, right? Are users downloading a whole bunch of files? Are you getting a whole bunch of spam reports, things like that? And then automated incident response. So when those activities do happen, when there is maybe a mass download by a user that's leaving the company or something like that, we are putting the controls in place to respond to that in an automated fashion. So we'll deep dive into each of these areas. And just for a little background on myself, longtime technologist. I've been a technologist for over 20 years. I was a Microsoft systems admin for the first half of my career. A company I was with about 12 years ago decided to go Google Apps at the time, and I've been a Google Cloud engineer since. So very well versed in the Google Cloud area. If you guys have any questions, your company is thinking about adopting Google Workspace or moving to Google Workspace, happy to answer any of those questions at the end. So the first area I wanted to jump into is one of those daily repetitive tasks, and notably onboarding and offboarding, with a bit more focus on the offboarding piece here. But with Google Workspace, it is very easy to create automated life cycles for your accounts as users come on into and out of the organization. Extremely important process, as I mentioned. Typically, how if I was a new administrator at a new company that didn't have any type of automation, prior to me starting, first thing I would look to do is, what HRIS system is my company using? Are they using a modern cloud-based system, something like Workday or Bamboo, that can automatically feed into downstream systems like Google Workspace? Workspace out of the box includes a number of connectors for third-party applications. So being that HR systems are typically where users need to live so they can get paid and those kind of things, it is a great source of that information to trickle downwards. So we would configure maybe our HRIS system to automatically notify our Google Workspace system that we have a new employee. Taking that a step further, I would start to work with my HR teams to make sure that when new employees got added to that HR system, that all of the associated profile attributes are also part of that onboarding process, right? So things like title and manager and cost code, where their address is or physical working location, things like that. All of that information, because Google can capture all of that profile information within its directory, you can then use to drive all sorts of automations. So yeah, things like title, department manager, these attributes again can be used for a number of automations once the data is available into Workspace.
Patrick, don't mind me if I chime in, but I remember when I was getting started, getting added to the appropriate distribution list, like either marketing or sales, it took quite a bit of time. I think one of them took about a month. Can this help? Can Workspace help with that as well?
Exactly. Yeah, that's a great example of one of those. One of the ways you can use all of that profile information to drive automations in Google Workspace. It's a relatively new feature too. So for most of the SKUs, there's a feature called dynamic groups. And the dynamic groups, it's a way for you as administrators to build criteria-based security and or mailing lists, depending on how you use those Google groups. But we can, for example, say everybody that's a member of the marketing team, because we're pulling that profile information in from our upstream HR system. We are populating that information in Google, and then we're saying, all right, Google, take all of the people that are in marketing and put them in this group called marketing@company.com, which can then dictate a whole bunch of things, right? I can then use that group to provision access to things like Google Drive, various calendars, or other application access, all driven from that single group and all of the attributes that drive it. All of this information is also helpful when you start to think about third-party and additional cloud-based systems that you're using in your organization. So you start to think about SCIM integration, right? So, all right, I'm a new administrator. I've joined this company. I've now worked with my HR team to establish a connection between my HR system and Google Workspace. From there, I now want to provision maybe all of my other cloud applications that my organization is using, things like Slack, Zoom, Salesforce, things like that. So we can additionally use that profile information to say, all right, all of the members of the marketing team that we created an automated dynamic group for, they are also going to get provisioned inside Salesforce when that account gets created. And because they're part of the marketing team, they're also going to get these roles within Salesforce after that provisioning is done. That SCIM integration, again, is all native to Google Workspace. There's a number of out-of-the-box detectors that can work with that profile and SCIM integration.
Patrick, quick question. I see you mentioned Slack, Salesforce, all those automations. Does that refer to like the login with Google button that I see on most websites?
Yes and no, not exactly. So what you see on those websites, Pinterest and TikTok, unfortunately, most web services these days make it very easy for a new user to go to that web service and create a new profile. Most commonly, you'll see sign in with Google or sign in with Facebook is another big one that has, this universal identity, I'll call it. This is an example of OAuth, right? So this is an OAuth connection that you're making to, say, Pinterest, and not exactly what I'm talking about here. Although all of the control around OAuth from an administrator's perspective is certainly something that you can automate and control within Workspace, and probably something that we should deep dive into in another upcoming webinar. OAuth control, very, very important, preventing your users from handing over access to third party. We can certainly deep dive into that. Great question, Nick. Thank you. All right, so the other area of automation that I mentioned is sort of building automation for repetitive tasks. And this is where it starts to get fun, right? So account provisioning, it's sort of dull and boring, right? It's something that we need to do, certainly on the deep provisioning side. And I didn't deep dive really into that, but the same that I talked about for the onboarding can be done for the offboarding side as well, right? So HR system is notified of an employee leaving, and then that sends signals downstream to ensure that the account access is turned off, documents and content are transferred where they need to go, etc. But one of the areas I love to get into in my day-to-day is building sort of automations and efficiencies for teams. Maybe it's my team directly and something that we're doing, or it's something that maybe I work with, pockets of the business and sort of canvas my organization, looking for opportunities to improve what they're doing using what is available in Google. Most notably, I use Google Apps Script to do that. We did a webinar on this, I think, late last year that we can provide the link to, or you can find it on our website. But Apps Script can be used to build almost an endless list of automations. Apps Script is Google's native rapid development platform that makes it easy to create business apps and utilities that integrate directly with Google Workspace. You can do things like add custom menus and dialogues to docs and sheets. You can write all sorts of custom functions. You can even publish a web app. So if you needed a full-blown sort of web URL and a web app, Google Apps Script can serve as that. I'm going to show you a couple examples of how we can do that. Apps Script can integrate with not only other Google services like YouTube and Analytics, but also third-party services. So via API connections, if you needed to establish a connection, say between Salesforce and Google, you can do so through Apps Script. And if you're using Workspace already, you may be familiar with things like add-ons in the marketplace. A lot of those are actually built with AppScript in the background. So you can build and publish your own add-ons that are available in the marketplace for other Workspace customers. As I mentioned, let's take a look at a couple of examples. I have one here. This one's interesting. So this is a good example of one that can have a web UI to it. And this request came to life after a request from our PMO office. So they are spinning up new projects seemingly every day, and multiple projects every day. And they wanted a way to create a standard set of folders for every project that they were involved with. So they were seeing that each PM was doing things slightly different. Maybe it's a capitalization thing or a spacing thing or a naming thing. So what we did is created a utility that would allow them to, via a web UI, simply go to a web page. It looks something like this. And they would be able to enter in a couple of parameters. Right? So I would say, we'll do this demo test, and we'll call this Nick's project. Right? So I'm just adding a couple of parameters around this project. And I'm going to go ahead and click on submit. We added a little bit of, indicators. Hey, there's something happening in the background. That has now finished, and it spits back a URL. And this just is going to take me to a spot in Google Drive. So we have, via this code, specified where in Google Drive this content should go. And what that script did is just create a new folder called a demo test Nick's project, right? So it's customer name and project name, and then added all of the associated folders that we want as part of that project automatically for the PM. Again, small example on the back end, what that code looks like. It's just a few lines of code, right? So this one has an HTML file associated with it. That's that web UI part that we just looked at. And then if you take a look at the code, pretty straightforward, right? We're just doing a couple of things like creating a folder. We can see here we're specifying what folders that we want as part of that project. So very small example, but it's actually been very useful for our PMO office to sort of get standardized a little bit.
Patrick, that's actually pretty neat. And I could see something like that being really useful. But I got another question for you. I've recently been getting a bunch of emails with multiple attachments. Those could be PDFs or even folders. And it gets tedious saving them to Drive, finding them in my messy drive, and then moving them to a certain folder.
Yep.
Can that be automated?
It's another great example. Yes, absolutely. So this is, there are still people that attach files to emails, right? Not everything is shared through Google Drive. And while Gmail makes it easy for you to just have a single button for you to click to say, all right, save this attachment to Drive, if you're receiving a lot of emails or you're working on a project, whatever the case may be, whatever's driving you to want that automation, it's certainly something that you can automate in Gmail. So with that prompt, I'll share this tab, right? Again, what do we have here? 26 lines of code, pretty straightforward. And what this is doing, right? So just to read through real quick, I'm saying, all right, I'm going to go and check my Gmail app, and I'm going to look for a label called demo. If I find a label with demo and it has a new email in it with an attachment, I am going to save that attachment automatically to Google Drive. All right, so that is in essence what this utility is doing. If I was to bounce back over, let's see if I can spin up a test real quick. I'm going to send myself an attachment from another email account. This should come in and filter into the demo label here that you see. We'll just give that a second to come in, and then we should see that the attachment in that email automatically gets saved to this folder. So we'll just let this bake for a second, see if it comes in. Come on. Now, this can be set up in a number of different ways. In fact, I have an advanced version of this copy of this where It's not looking for a single label, right? I can have multiple labels. Maybe I'm a project manager that has multiple projects, right? So the other power, there we go. So the email has just come in. It has an attachment in it. So what we should see is this script run and ultimately find that file in this folder. So if we give this just a second, we should see a new file get added to this folder in just a second. Now, these scripts work in a trigger-based event, and I'll show you what that means. So here we go. The script just executed, and we can see here that the script automatically added that new file that came in via Gmail directly to that drive, folder. What do you think, Nick? Helpful?
I mean, super helpful. That would be amazing for myself. I might need to you might need to send that after this webinar. You know me, I got another question for you then. I recently created a shared drive for me and the SDR team. We all collaborate on there and whole 9 yards, but I never get notification when someone either adds a new file or something around the lines of that. Is that something that we can make happen?
Yeah, that's a good one, and one that I've been working in Google for, like I said, over 12 years now, and it still sort of puzzles me that this isn't sort of a native feature. So Nick, what you're referring to is when you're collaborating in Google Drive. Google Drive is great for that. If we have a folder that's shared out with a bunch of team members, and one of those team members adds a new file to the folder, there's no native way for you to get a notification that says, "Hey, Nick has added a new file to your project folder." So again, using Google Apps Script, we can absolutely do something like that, where it just sends a simple email notification based on a file count, right? So an example of that, this would again run. I'll show you what the triggers look like in Google Apps Script. All right, so I have a trigger here, right? So I've just set this trigger up to run. Well, this one specifically, sorry, excuse me. This one's set to run every minute, right? So every minute this script is doing what it does, and it goes and looks at a specific folder or set of folders if I wanted it to, and captures what the current file count is. And if that current file count increases by any number, it'll send out a notification. All right, so what we have here, and I'll use that same folder, right? So I've just added another file. I saved that actually twice. I've added a new file here to that demo folder that we just looked at. So if I was to execute this script now, it would actually shoot off an email to me. So I'm going to check for new files and run that. All right, execution completed. If I was to switch back over to my email now, I can see I have gotten an automated email that says a new file has been added to my Google Drive folder. Sounds like we have some utilities to install for you, Nick. I will follow up with you after we're done here.
Perfect. You knew I was going to ask that.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. So Google Apps Script, again, those are sort of, very high level examples. Apps Script, super powerful. And what you'll see most often is Apps Script working within Google Sheets, right? So Google Sheets, if you go to Google Sheets, there's an option to open up Apps Script from there, and then you can do all sorts of things within your Google Sheet Apps Script. But with that said, let me skip over to the next slide here, and we'll finish up with, there's a bunch of, okay, I think I fixed that. To shift gears a little bit, the last piece that I talked about in terms of like those three sort of holy grail areas of automation, and at least for my day-to-day, is the incident response, right? So I get automated email alerts for things, and I get all sorts of monitoring set up within Workspace, to let me know if there's some sort of anomalous activity. I'm able to set up all sorts of automations and efficiency gains using Apps Script and other utilities like AppSheet, which we didn't get into today, but is an extension of Apps Script that we can talk about in a future session, and we have some previous sessions on. The last piece is incident response automations. And again, if you're not using Google Workspace today, but thinking about using Google Workspace, the advances that Google has made on the security side sort of speak for themselves. So things like drive data protection, being able to automatically block or limit the sharing of files that your users create if those files contain any sort of sensitive data. That sensitive data being defined by you and your organization, right? So that could be things like credit card numbers and social security numbers are very common. But within your organization, maybe it's healthcare information or patent information or document information. All of those controls are native to Google Workspace. So when your users are creating files and collaborating, using the power of Google Drive, which you want to encourage, you're encouraging that with the safety net of knowing that they're not leaking customer information and things like that. Taking that a step further, trust and activity rules, sort of self-explanatory, right? So, well, maybe not so. Trust rules define the ways your users can also share files, right? So we talked about data protection and the data types that are in those documents. But you can also set up incident response to say, if Nick shares files with his personal Gmail account, I'm going to send off notifications, or I'm going to block his access, or I'm going to do this. It's a very common thing that we see through our workspace, or customers using Workspace, is they want to encourage the use, but they want to do that within a box. And Google's ability to respond to the incidents that you're looking to prevent, I think has over the last 12 months has grown exponentially. Lastly, example here is another area where incident response sort of plays a factor is context-aware access. Context-aware access is Google's engine for defining criteria in which a user can or cannot access Google Workspace and its associated applications. To say that another way, I am able to, as an administrator, to say if Nick all of a sudden is trying to log in from, I don't know, somewhere outside of the United States, right? We know Nick works in Texas. So if he suddenly starts logging into his Workspace account from Europe, then we know as administrators, hey, something's a little off here, right? So we can immediately shut down access to Nick's account, and by extension, other accounts if we wanted to. So context-aware access uses a bunch of different contextual attributes to determine whether or not the activity that is happening is safe or not. Again, geofencing, IP restrictions, device restrictions, so allowing or preventing users from accessing your workspace and associated cloud applications if they're not using a company-approved device. And that could be a mobile device or an endpoint device like a computer. So with that said, again, if you guys are thinking about Google Workspace and want to deep dive into any of these areas, certainly reach out. Andrew and Nick will provide that information as we move forward here. But with that said, Nick, I think you're going to talk a little bit about how Worsta can help.
Yeah, I appreciate all the information, Patrick. I know that was a lot to digest, but referring to the slide Patrick showing and also the content we discussed today, Worsta has a variety of services, trainings, and offerings that can help you utilize your Google Workspace platforms to the fullest potential. Myself and other of my colleagues will be in touch soon after today to provide you with the resources you need to get started. With that being said, looks like we have a couple minutes to spare, so let's jump into our Q&A session. I know, let me get back to this. I saw a quick question from Tyree. Looks like he's a Google admin for his company, and he adds users to his Google Drives. Patrick, is this something you're able to answer?
Yep, great question here. So, and great use of Google Groups, right? So you're automatically sort of what I was talking about, right? You're adding users to groups, and that group is then being used to drive access to a Google Drive asset, which is fantastic. Upon removal or upon termination, no, users are, depending on what your processes are, not automatically removed from Google Groups natively. Certainly something that Google Apps Script can help with. And then if you start to look at those dynamic groups that we talked about, there is a way that you could create a dynamic group. And this would require, a little bit of re-engineering of your current groups, right? So you would have to migrate your current groups into these dynamic groups. But you could build out a dynamic group very similar to how you're doing it today. And then within that dynamic group, you would have a way to exclude archived or suspended users. So potentially dynamic groups If not, we may have, we may need to look into something more advanced like an app script to achieve what you need. Another question would be if we can add users to Google Groups automatically based on the department field in Google. Yes. If you are on, I think it's Enterprise. Let me take a look at the SKUs real quick. Dynamic groups are limited to certain versions of Workspace. So give me 1 second and I will try to figure out which one it is on. All right, dynamic groups or criteria-based groups, if anybody is an old Forefront Identity Manager admin. Dynamic groups are available in Enterprise Standard and Enterprise Plus SKUs. So if you're using an Enterprise Essentials or a Business Plus plan, you're not going to see that automated group. For you, Tyree, if you are on like a business SKU and don't have the dynamic groups, reach out, and I think we can help you with some app script stuff. It feels like if you're limited because of what SKU you're on, we can do some app script work. Thank you, Natalie. Enterprise Standard and Plus only. You beat me to it. Excellent. Let's see.
It's a good question, though.
Yeah, absolutely great question. I'm happy to bring that up here as well. Can I do a screen share? We'll kill some time here as people think of some questions. Maybe we can put up a poll. How many of you are using Workspace today, or thinking about using Workspace? Let's see. Can I switch tabs here? I think I can. We'll stop presenting here. Do this.
I saw someone use the reaction new feature.
Those are brand new, the reactions. So Tyree is saying he's on Enterprise Standard. So let's take a look at this. Maybe you can follow along at home, and I'm certainly not encouraging anybody to make any changes in their environment. During this call, I just want to preface that. Please, do your due diligence on your changes. But Tyree, what you potentially could be looking at is, and this is a demo environment, so forgive any weird data in here, but under your directory, under groups, Tyree, you should have an option here on the Enterprise Standard SKU to create a dynamic group. And here is where you're going to go and build those criteria or the attributes, the parameters around your dynamic group. And department should absolutely be one of these values. So we can see here at equal department is a value here. I don't have much data in this demo environment, so this probably isn't going to work, but that is essentially how that would work. So let me see. You have an account here? There you are. All right, so I mentioned, all of the attributes again, coming from, if you're on Microsoft, if you're familiar with the Active Directory and LDAP systems, the attributes that you use in those systems, they are equally available here in Google Workspace. Workspace in and of itself can act as an LDAP. So if you have LDAP dependent applications like Jira, et cetera, you can use Google Workspace as your LDAP provider. A lot of our customers, after they transition from something like Exchange or Microsoft 365, they'll use potentially Active Directory for a short period of time, but start to migrate all of those services if there's no other dependencies. Each organization is different, and certainly Active Directory can be part of your infrastructure and footprint if you wanted it to be. But all sorts of attribute information and the ability to add as many attributes as you need to. So if you need additional attributes added to your users, you can certainly do that as well. So I'm going to add you to the marketing group here, Nick. And if we go back into groups and create dynamic group, and we find that department again, I should be able to find you now. Marketing. Preview. There we go. Nick is there. And here's that option. I think you were asking about the suspended users as well. So depending on what your deprovisioning process is, if you are deprovisioning or if you are suspending users as part of that offboarding, you can use the exclude suspended users. Wow, that's great to say. If I would normally is a positive change. That unfortunately cannot be done. So if you have an existing group that was built before dynamic groups, unfortunately, you would have to rebuild that group as a dynamic group. Great question, though. Let's see. You can these dynamic groups can be compounded with certain or multiple parameters. And you can include some or statements. So it can be, hey, if the organization's department is marketing or legal, you could do the same thing. But great question, Tyree. You would have to redo those groups. Excellent. Excellent. I think we have until about 11:45. I don't see any other questions coming in. Happy to answer any questions, or if anybody has, an area of concern that we didn't sort of address here, I'm happy to dive in and use that time if you'd like. Otherwise, Nick, Andrew, if there's anything else that you want to cover.
Got a quick question, actually. The changing the groups from a normal group to a dynamic group, is this something, speaking on the topic we've talked about today, can it be automated?
Not really. No, not really.
Gotcha.
So you're going to want to do some analysis of all your existing groups, and certainly if groups have been used, like and sorry, Tyree, I'm going to use an example here. Tyree was saying that he has an existing manual group, right? A group that has been maintained manually, and that group has been used for various access in Google Drive. For him specifically, as he starts to think about using dynamic groups and replacing those manual groups with dynamic groups, you'll have to have a good understanding of where those groups were used for a certain access, right? So you wouldn't want to just go ahead and blindly delete all of your manual groups and then recreate existing groups, because you may be removing access from something that you didn't intend to. So if you are going to go through an exercise of sort of converting, do so with sort of due diligence and take the time to make sure that you understand where those groups are being used. There's some reports that you can get to or get from the admin console to help drive that. And then past that, I would use things like GAM and API access to do a query, for example. Show me all the shared drives that this group is shared with, things like that. But now it's not really a manual or an automated effort. It would be something that would take a little bit of time to sort of piece together.
Perfect.
Excellent. We talked a lot about, reporting and monitoring and things like that. Just to give you an idea of what that looks like in Workspace, if you're unfamiliar, Google has, updated this section. They've added some new features here in their rules section. And they do a couple of different things, right? So activity roles, certainly, right? So we have a new activity role demo. Well, man, we can't play. All right, and we're going to add some conditions here, and we could say, hey, maybe, I don't know, every time, like I was saying before, we could say drive log events. If the event is a download, all right, we are going to do some sort of action, right? So these are the types of things we can, even see in this demo environment, how much activity is actually happening based on that event that I just inputted, right? So this would be a monitoring rule that I would absolutely put in place, and then make sure that me and my team are notified when these things occur. It's an example of the rules, the activity rules. Data protection is a little bit different. We talked about data protection. With data protection, let's see if I have an example here. Somewhere. Maybe this one. Yeah. So with data protection, what you can do is things like, again, if I am looking for a file, or if I want to scan all of my Google Drive, for certain content type, I would be able to do so through data protection rules, and then do things like automatically add a drive label, which, if you haven't seen before, is a new classification engine within Workspace. So if I found a file through my automated scans that found a social security number here, I can have a rule that says automatically apply a label to that file called restricted. Again, you could do a number of different things, but it's a quick example. Excellent. That's all I got, Nick. I will pass it back to you. I think any other questions?
If
I've got another one that came in from Tyree. Thank you, Tyree, for the questions. Would you happen to know of a way we can actually push alerts out? Let's say if a user in our workspace has put in the wrong password. Signs into an account using an abnormal web page as a password. Yeah, so good question. So Tyree's asking about some of those activity alerts. Let me see if I can get back into that pretty quickly. Okay, we're going to go back in here. Now, it may not be able to capture all of the activity types that you're looking for, but you're going to want to start here, I think, Tyree, if I'm understanding correctly. So there would definitely be an activity rule for like passwords, a password activity rule. Because I'm standing. The data source would be admin log events. And the event is password. So you're going to come here. That's probably not the right event. User. But event is password. Leak password. So you're going to use a combination of these rules, but let's just, for example, I don't want to spend too much time here. If this was the event that you're looking for, you would want to send that to your alert center, Tyree. And then from here, you can also, once you enable the option to send to the alert center, you can then send the option or set up the option to send an email alert. If you wanted to do something like a Slack alert, you would have to create a webhook to do that. Thanks, John. So you'd have to create a webhook to do that if you wanted a Slack alert, but you theoretically could do that via an email address, right? So you would set up an email address. So you wouldn't do all super admins, for example. I would do something like this, and then I would create a webhook address where I can send that alert to if you wanted it to be consumed in something else. So yes, you can do something like that. Lastly is outputting, another area of automation that we didn't really talk about. On the reporting side is BigQuery exports, right? So taking all of these logs and then sending them somewhere else outside of Workspace or outside of the admin console, so that can do even additional or more in-depth reporting. So if you have a SIM tool like Looker or something like that, Tableau, if you wanted to visualize your data in another way, you can automate the output of all of your logs into another system, and then potentially set up alerts. If Google doesn't have that natively, Tyree, potentially something that you can look at a third party for. Excellent. Great question. Thank you so much.
those are some good questions. And then if no one has any other questions, I can let y'all loose a little quick, or a little bit early. Just wanted to say thank you though. Thanks for everyone for showing up. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and then also wishing everyone here a successful 2020.